Up until recently, this was the camera I recommended to anybody looking to get into film photography. Of course, it's the Pentax K1000, released in 1971. It's affordable, it's built like a tank, and it's simple almost to a fault. But my new top recommendation is, strangely, none of those things. So why, then, do I think that the Pentax 17 is unbeatable as a first camera or a first step into the world of analog? Or even for more advanced shooters looking to try something new? Well, it's probably not this fixed 37mm equivalent f3.5 lens that's a bit slow for most people. It's also not the maximum shutter speed of 1/350th of a second, which is also kinda slow. And unfortunately, I have to admit, it's not the looks either. There's just a little too much going on up here. I know, pot, kettle, black. Moving on. Of course, should be obvious by now, this is not a sponsored video. I did borrow this camera from Pentax, but they have no say on whether or not I make a video at all, let alone a good one, and I have no financial relationship with them. So if it's not the lens, or the shutter speed, or the looks, then what is it that makes the Pentax 17 so good? 17? 1-7? Like the Pentax 6-7? I don't know. Well, there's a few reasons that made me realize it was going to topple the K1000 off the list. Starting with this, it's new. Aside from the cruel and relentless passage of time where every year goes by even faster and I still don't feel like I've caught up to where I was supposed to be last year, time and age, also quite important for cameras. This K1000 was my first ever camera, and while it's a beautiful example of the artistry of Japanese manufacturing, it's still, newsflash, 50 years old. And that's a really lucky example of a camera that was really well looked after before it became mine, and it still needed a service. Using old cameras has a lot of downsides. For one, you don't even really know if they're gonna work. My girlfriend recently picked up this Zorky 4, which is a really cool rangefinder, and shot her first roll through it. But we don't know if the camera works at all until we get that roll developed. In fact, I needed to take it into a dark room to get the film out because we're not sure, that there's something wrong with the rewinding mechanism. And that's just one of countless examples of buying used vintage cameras being a bit of an ordeal. Most of the time, they're fine, but sometimes they don't work at all, or they need adjusting, or maybe they just smell really bad. All of that uncertainty goes away with the Pentax 1.7 because it's new. You know the shutter works and that the light meter is accurate and that the film won't break off inside the camera. Removing the possibility for those strange and difficult to figure out problems means that you can focus on confidently taking great pictures, which is a massive bonus. Now, speaking of focus, the Pentax 17 has a zone focusing system, which I think actually is a good thing. Instead of focusing by making the picture sharp in the viewfinder or by lining up a patch, you simply look at the pictures on the lens and match it to whatever you're shooting and how far away it is. When this camera first came out, a few people complained about this and they wanted proper manual focus, and I get it, but I remember how I felt when I first started film photography, and most of how I felt was overwhelmed. There's so many different settings to remember and steps to think about that it's almost too much, and so I think simplifying the focus like this is a great way to still get you to learn about distance and focus without making you spend 4 minutes fiddling with the focusing for every picture you take. And that theme of making it simple and fun to take photos goes further than the focusing. It's the same with exposure. Instead of forcing us to learn the exposure triangle, Pentax have given us some modes, and modes that very cleverly help us learn over time what different settings might do to our images without us really needing to think about it too much. The bokeh setting, to make the background blurry, it shoots as wide open as possible, and then we see the photos later, we can learn what that does and how it affects the results we get. Slow shutter flash, a mode that I was really glad to see in here. This one teaches us about contrast and how we can use flash to balance the exposure of our image. Do you see what I mean? It's simple enough to not be scary to learn to use, but it's giving you just enough to start making some connections up here in your creative juice machine and some creative decisions down here on the camera. A great creative decision you could make right now would be to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now, the elephant in the room. This thing shoots 35mm film, which is great fun, but it also shoots it in a half frame format. If you're unfamiliar, all that means is that the photos it takes are half the size of a normal 35mm shot, which gives us vertical compositions, but much more excitingly, twice as many photos on the same roll of film. Instead of just 36 frames, this camera gives us 72. That's massive, literally, and one of the big reasons that I recommend this thing. When you have that many more shots per roll, you can try more and experiment more and take more photos for cheaper. If you think about it, we get better at photography by taking more photos, and this camera really forces us to do that. Do you know how else you get better at photography? Is by being subscribed to the channel, of course, but even better than that is looking at other photographers' work, and especially in print. Looking at photos on your phone screen is a bit silly, and it's a lot less inspiring than looking at photos on a wall, in a book, or in a magazine. Like Frames magazine, for example, who are very kindly the sponsors of today's video. Frames magazine is kind of what I'd call the perfect inspiration dosage. Each quarter, you get a beautifully printed collection of works from a handful of photographers. There's no bloat, there's no listicles about camera bags, and no big noisy ads to interrupt your experience. It's just photos, presented plain and simple. There's also quite a big range of photography, so you're bound to see some work that you've never seen before, and it's a really great way to spark some creative juices. In this issue, there's some photos by Mark Forbes, who's a big inspiration to me right now, and seeing these in the flesh, or paper, I guess, is a completely different experience to seeing them on Instagram. The fun part is that it's not just a magazine you get. You get access to the Frames community, which is thriving and full of great events and talks from successful photographers and all sorts. They even have a podcast. It's a seriously great investment for your creativity, and it's also super affordable, especially when you use the link below and get 10% off your subscription with my discount code HYDRATED10. A big thank you to Frames magazine and to you for helping to support this channel. But more importantly than the settings or the half frame format or the fact that it's a new camera or the wacky looks, this camera does one thing extremely well: fun. It might sound silly, but I'm dead serious. Fun is really important. If you're not having fun, you won't keep going, keep taking your camera everywhere, and you won't enjoy the process. And isn't that kind of the whole point? When I'm shopping for cameras, I never look at settings or lens sharpness or megapixels. All I care about is how fun that camera is to use. How does it inspire me to get off the sofa and go make stuff? And the Pentax 17 is it focused? And the Pentax 17 is so much fun. It's addictive to fire off these little vertical compositions, and it's much easier than I expected to go through 72 frames. Now, a lot of people worry that half frame is too small and that the quality won't be good enough, but I don't really think so. The negative is about the same size as Super 35, which a motion picture is shot on, and it's much bigger than Super 16, which still looks pretty fine to me. But that doesn't mean this camera is perfect. There's no such thing, and this is no exception. Half frame is a great format for loads of reasons. Scanning is not one of them. Most labs will scan it for you, but they'll scan it in pairs in a normal 35mm frame size, and if you want the images individually, you'll need to crack open Photoshop and split them yourself. Yes, this is a good excuse to learn to edit, but it can be a pain unless you're scanning the film yourself. Should I do a video on that? Also, shout out to Photoforma Lab for doing a great job with these scans, by the way. They did scan them individually for me, and if you're in Poland, I can't recommend them enough. If you pop into the lab in Warsaw, let them know I sent you. Also, one of my favorite features of the Pentax 17 is the built-in flash. It's super bright, and I love to take photos of my friends at night. However, it's kind of almost impossible to do so because the little flash is ready light in the viewfinder is so bright that when I have my eye up to it, I can't see anything else, and I have to shoot blind. If I was going to keep this camera, I think I would probably have to tape over that LED. And yes, the big one, this is much more expensive than this. My K1000 cost me about $30 back before film was cool, but nowadays runs about $100 on eBay, whereas this is $500, which sounds like a lot, but aside from $500 really not going as far as it used to, if you think about who this camera is for, I don't think it's unreasonable. I think that Pentax agrees with me that in order to revitalize the new film camera market, they can't be selling cameras to people like me. I've been shooting film since before it was cool. I drive cars from the 80s because I like them better. I was never going to be the kind of customer that buys a new film camera. I'm the kind of customer that buys a 50-year-old film camera and actually likes it when the shutter gets stuck open, because that's just the kind of person I am. And I think a lot of film photographers are very similar. No, the kind of customer that Pentax needs for brand new film cameras to be a mainstream industry again is a mainstream customer. People with regular jobs that take photos for fun and for Instagram, hobby photographers. And for that audience, $500 is probably their yearly Lego budget or how much they spent on their last pair of sneakers. So with that in mind, and the fact that over at Pentax they were pulling engineers out of retirement so that they could remember how to make film cameras, I think the price is fine, actually. The price of these lovely embroidered spoon, dad caps, and t-shirts is also fine, so pick yours up today at shop.huntercreatesthings.com. There's a link below. But whether you get funky and pick up a Pentax 17, or you go old school and get a Pentax K1000, the really important thing is that you keep taking photos, having fun, and trying new things. Photography is so rewarding, and if you persevere with it, it can change your life in ways you can't possibly imagine. And whether you like the Pentax 17 or not, one thing we can all agree on is that having more choice, more options as consumers is always a good thing. So get out there with whatever camera you like the smell of best, make some art, and see what happens. If you'd like to learn more about the Pentax K1000, you can watch this next. Stay hydrated and create art.